I-beam for Asset Management. Asset Obligation Requests, Creation and Assignee Review. This session is intended for internal users that are creating and accepting the Asset Obligation Request. While all Avalon Bay associates have access to these records, this session will walk through an example for either a development or construction admin. First, ensure all documents have been added to the Property Control Documents BP. Next, we'll create any necessary asset obligation requests. The asset obligation request will then route to the listed approver for review. The assignee is to review the asset obligation request record and may accept responsibility or send it back for reassignment. At the appropriate time, the asset obligation action record will kick off to the assignee. Let's take a look. The Asset Obligation Request is located within the Community tab. To find the Community tab, we'll click on the plus mark and enter the community name. A community will not have additional information such as -NC for new construction or RD for redevelopment. Click on the proper community tab, and now we'll go down to Property Control, Asset, and Asset Obligation Request. First, be sure that any necessary documents have already been added to the Property Control Docs BP. If you need any assistance with this, refer to the training documentation, such as the job aid or video. Now let's create our asset obligation request. There's a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning for every asset obligation you have, there'll be a separate request record. In our example, we're going to say that this is for rent control. So we'll click on New, and a new window will pop up. We're asked to select our workflow. You have the options of closing an existing asset obligation request, modifying an existing asset obligation request, or creating a brand new one, and that's what we're going to do. Click OK. First, let's expand our upper form so we can see more of the information at once. To do that, we'll click right here. Any fields that are gray, you're not able to influence, and they'll auto-populate later. Any field with a red asterisk is mandatory. So we'll start under Request Information. You'll notice some guidance here as you work through the record. Under New Action Requested, this is going to be an ongoing obligation. You also have the options of one-time or informational. Next, submit the reason for the request. Again, in our example, we're utilizing rent control. So we could type in that this is for rent control allowance verification, and then list the increases. Next, we're asked if there's a source document for this entry. And we do have one, so we'll say yes. Next, we're asked if all relevant documents are attached, and we haven't attached any yet, but we can see that if there are specific documents we'd like to attach to this record, we can do so from the Unifier folders. So let's do that. We'll come up to Add Attachment, Unifier folder, and then Property Control and Rent Controls. Here we find our Restrictions folder. You just keep digging until you get to the document that you need. And you can either double-click or highlight and say OK. Now you'll find the attachment is here in the lower left-hand corner. So we can say yes, all relevant documents have been attached. We'll scroll down. This is where we'd be able to tell whomever is reading the record where specifically to look for the information they need within this document we've attached. It might be a particular page, section, or paragraph. Here under Action Item Assignee, you're able to assign the actual action item. As a reminder, this record will route to whomever you have assigned the task for. The task will be to take care of the ongoing obligation of confirming and verifying the rent control allowance. So here we'll click Select, and to find the proper person, you can use the Find function. Simply click it, type in their name, and click Search. Once you have your result, you can either double-click or highlight and click Select. Under Obligation Information, we're asked to pull in any active obligations BREF. When you click Select, you should find one available record. Go ahead and double-click and pull it in. This ties some of the information together on the back end. Next, select your obligation type. Now, we've already said that this is specific to rent controls and restrictions, but there are several options. If we had selected capital budget or operating budget, then we likely would have had annual estimated cash inflow or outflow to list as well. That's it for the upper form. So now we'll go on to the lower form. Now, we said we are creating a new ongoing request. You could also create a one-time. So I'll click on Ongoing, and you should see an Add button. If you don't, minimize the screen and then re-expand it. Next, we'll click on Add. If you click on Add and a window does not pop up, check your pop-up blockers. First, we're asked to say the frequency. And we have a shortcut built in for you where you could click Select, and since ours is annual, I'm going to go to General and then Annual, one time a year. Double click and pull it in. And you can see that the frequency and the frequency unit have been pulled in. You don't have to use the Select button to add these entries. Next, we're asked the schedule details. And there's some more guidance for you here. Let's say that we need to do these June of any given year. So first, we'll select our start date. And since I want this to start in June 2018, I'm going to select the date of June 2017 because this will kick off once a year and this is our starting point. Then you can provide your lead time days. Generally, you'll probably enter 30 here. This represents how far in advance the assignee will be notified about the action task that requires completion. Generally, you would select 30. We'll scroll down, and you can see that our obligation type has auto-populated. We can also create a due date. We said this is kicking off on June 15th with a 30-day lead time. We can say it's due by the end of June 2018 and say OK. If there had been estimated cash flow or outflow, those would have auto-populated. Here under Description, you'll want to make sure that you're very detailed. Consider that you likely will not be the person completing this obligation, so you want to make sure it's very clear to whomever is assigned the task exactly what's expected. Because ours is regarding rent control, we'll drop in a pretty detailed description. First, we'll make sure they're familiar that this is the annual review and update of rent control percentages. And when the asset obligations task kicks off, then the assignee is to review existing information. If the allowed percentages have changed, they need to create a modified asset obligation request to update the information, and then they are to close the asset obligation actions record after adding commentary of whether the percentages are the same or if they have changed and if they've modified the asset obligation request. Under Obligation Closeout, you can provide a final closeout date. Generally speaking, you may want to leave this blank and then create a modification when it's time to close out the obligation. When you're done, you can click OK. It's very important that there's only one line item here for each asset obligation request. If you have another asset obligation request, you'll create a whole new record. Now that we've completed the upper form, added our attachment, and created our line item, we'll come to Action Details, and we're ready to move the record forward. On the top right-hand side, we'll go to Workflow Actions Submit, and you'll see that this will automatically go to whomever you've assigned the task to. When you're ready, click Send. And here we can see our pending record. Now that this record has been submitted, it is routed to the assignee to review to ensure they accept responsibility, that they are the proper person to take action when the Asset Obligation Actions record kicks off. As the assignee, you'll receive an email notification of a task. You'll be asked to log in and take action. Let's take a look at that email. You'll find a link that you can click to log in and take action. This will take you directly to the record at hand. The other option is to go directly into the system, and under your Home tab, you'll find the open task. Simply double-click on the number to open it. This task is for you to confirm that you are indeed the correct assignee when the Asset Obligation Action kicks off. Once we've opened the record, click on Accept Task. Next, you can review the information. We see that this is an ongoing obligation specific to rent control allowance verification. We can also see that there's a source document for this entry, and the attachment is found down here on the lower left. I'll scroll down, and we're even given some additional information on where within that document to look. To understand the timing of this request, when the action item will literally kick off, go down to the lower tabs, and if this is an ongoing, which it is, you would use New Ongoing. Otherwise, you could look under New One-Time Obligation. Here's our line item. To gain more information, simply double-click. And here we can see that this is an annual obligation request starting in May of 2017, so that the first time it would kick off would be 2018, with a lead time of 30 days. So that means in mid-April every year, an action item will kick off so that it can be completed by May 31st, the due date found here. Scroll down. And here's our description. This is literally what we'll be doing for the action item. Review those notes, and when you've finished, click OK. There shouldn't be an obligation closeout date for a first-time entry. If you have any questions with either the timing or any of the information you found in the upper form, you do have the ability to send this record back. If you are going to send the record back, you'll want to come down under General Comments, click Add, and then list your question or concerns here. For example, if you do not believe you are the correct assignee for this and it needs to go to someone else, you could list that person's name. When you're finished, click OK. Then close window. Now we'll look at the action details. We're ready to move this record forward, so on the top right-hand side we'll come to Workflow Actions, and we can either return this to the creator, in which case they'll see our general comments of why it's been returned, or we can click Accepted, meaning we accept the responsibility once the action item kicks off based on the dates we found within the asset obligation request. And when you're ready, click Send. Now this has been removed from our Home tab, and if we go to the Community, we can come down to Property Control, Asset, Asset Obligation Request, and we'll find the record has been completed here. And at the proper time, we'll receive email notification of the Asset Obligation Action awaiting our completion. For assistance, please refer either to the written instructions or contact support